On Friday, June 21, I took the opportunity to ride aboard the new high-capacity metro train, or HCMT for short, all the way out to East Pakenham, a brand new station, as opposed to a station rebuilt for a level crossing removal, that opened only 17 days before I arrived in Melbourne. I also filmed a reasonable amount of trams in the city centre, as well as at Clardendon Street Junction on the south side of the Yarra River. Considering the fact that I've seen the preserved ex-Melbourne trams in Auckland and Christchurch multiple times, in 2023 alone, I was curious to see what their old home is like in 2024. These days, the different tram types used in Melbourne are the A, B2, C1, C2, D, E, W8, and Z3 classes. And not counting the refurbished W8 trams, the oldest tram type still running in Melbourne is the Z3 class, of which 115 examples were built between 1979 and 1983. There were the older Z1 and Z2 variants as well, but they were both withdrawn from service in 2016. Although they've been banished from all but one of Melbourne's tram routes, the W series is still considered an icon of the city. Indeed, starting in 2012, at least 12 trams across the SW6 and W7 classes have so far been refurbished and redesignated as the W8 class. However, they only run on Route 35, also known as the City Circle. This is a free-of-charge tourist service that operates in central Melbourne, in an area known as the Free Tram Zone, and the heritage trams are back to their old green and cream livery, as opposed to the elaborate maroon livery that I saw in 2013. I wonder why they went back to that original livery. Anyway, when I rode in a W8, I didn't notice too many differences between her and, for example, the unrefurbished SW6 number 893 back in Auckland. However, I did notice some out-of-place/modern additions on the W8, in the form of newer panels of buttons in the cab and a scrolling LED screen in the passenger saloon, which they definitely wouldn't have had in their original condition. As for the D class, this is a variant of the Siemens Combino family, and 59 examples were built for Melbourne between 2002 and 2004. 38 members of the class are the 3-section D1 variant, while the remaining 21 are the 5-section D2 variant. Unfortunately, I didn't get to ride on a D1 or D2 while I was in Melbourne, so I don't really have that much of an opinion on these trams. Indeed, the only tram classes I managed to ride on were the C1, C2, E, W8 and Z3 classes. The E class are currently the newest trams on Melbourne's network, but they will soon lose that title to the upcoming G class. 100 examples of the E class were built at Bombardier's Dandenong factory, hence the big Made in Melbourne for Melbourne stickers, between 2013 and 2021. There are two variants of the design, designated as E1 and E2, with 50 examples each, but the only difference I noticed between them was the slimmer hazard lights on the E2's cab front, which looks better than the E1 in my opinion. Despite their similar classification, the C1 and C2 trams are actually very different from each other. The C1 is a 3-section Alstom Citadis 202, while the C2 is a 5-section Alstom Citadis 302. There are only 5 examples of the latter class, and they were originally built for the city of Mulhouse in France, but sent to Melbourne as they were deemed surplus to requirements in Mulhouse, and I apologise if I've mispronounced that name. There was also a need to reduce overcrowding on Route 96, which is the only route that the C2s run on. As for the C1 class, these things were built for Melbourne right from the start, but I was surprised to find out that only 36 examples of this class were ever built. They were introduced between October 2001 and August 2002, and these days you'll find them running on routes 48 and 109. Although the C1s are significant as the first low-floor trams to enter service in Melbourne, I don't like them, and that's mainly because of their bland appearance and abysmally rough ride quality, especially when they're going around corners or through intersections with other tram lines. I started the day's rail fanning at Moonee Ponds before heading down to North Melbourne. My first catch at North Melbourne that morning was a pleasant surprise. This was another XPT set coming down from Sydney. As one would expect, there were plenty of V-line trains passing by. Despite being bored of the ubiquitous velocity DMUs, I'm still happy with how this shot turned out. By chance, I saw the special Extrapolis 100 unit that wears an Indigenous livery. This set consists of coaches 934M, 1867T and 933M. The main reason why I went to North Melbourne in the first place was to see NR82 heading back to Adelaide with the overland, and fortunately, a velocity didn't get in the way. Soon after NR82 passed by, this random HCMT showed up on an empty run, presumably headed for the Sunbury line. Seconds before the HCMT went under the flyover, I got this shot of an Alstom Comenge leaving and the overland in the background. After riding aboard a Comenge from North Melbourne to Parliament, I went out to the tram stop on MacArthur Street and filmed a few trams while I decided what to do next. I decided to catch a Route 109 service along Collins Street, across the Yarra River and as far south as Clardendon Street Junction, in the hope that I would see one of the rare C2 trams again. The specific tram I rode in to get to Clardendon Street Junction was C1 class number 3003. Back in the city, I ended up walking from Collins Street down to the Elizabeth Street tram terminus, and saw D2 class number 5015 leaving on a Route 19 service to North Coburg. This was the only D2 I saw throughout the entire trip. Not long after I saw those EDI Commons units leaving Flinders Street, another set turned up on the same platform. 352M is significant to me as, back in October 2013, I photographed this very same coach at Newport Station after I finished a round trip on the Williamstown branch. It wasn't long before my train to East Pakenham arrived. HCMTs always go anti-clockwise around the city loop, but they won't be running on that section for much longer.
Train arriving on platform 6, stand clear please. East Pakenham service now on platform 6.
Now, as much as I don't like the HCMT's external appearance, I will say that the interior design is very nice from an aesthetic perspective. The seats, on the other hand, are just about as comfortable as those on the AM class in Auckland, and that's not a compliment. Around the corner from South Yarra, we pass the southern entrance to the Melbourne Metro Tunnel, which is set to open in 2025. When it opens, the tunnel will be used exclusively by HCMTs, and this will enable the Sunbury line to through-run with the Cranbourne and Pakenham lines. The sight of HCMTs running through Southern Cross, Flinders Street, and the City Loop will soon be confined to the history books. A sizable number of stations on the Pakenham Line have recently been rebuilt as part of the level crossing removal project. This was my view out of the window as we went along the Skyrail structure between Murrumbina and Hughesdale. Considering the fact that the journey from Flinders Street to East Pakenham is over 1 hour long, it's kind of surprising that the HCMTs don't have any toilets on board. As the train approached Officer Station, she ran through the site of the old Station Street level crossing, which closed within the last few months. Much like Carnegie, Murrumbina, Hughesdale, and Narre Warren, Pakenham Station itself was also rebuilt on an elevated structure. This rebuilt station opened on the same day as East Pakenham.
The next station is East Pakenham. Arriving at East Pakenham. This train will be terminating at East Pakenham.
Frankly, I was excited to visit East Pakenham Station given just how recently it opened. As a reminder, it opened on the 3rd of June 2024. The station is surprisingly well equipped given the fact that it only really serves an industrial estate on the south side and a low-density residential area on the north side. According to the videos that Tateset and Strayer Trains each made about the station, it was built to provide a more convenient place for V-Line trains to overtake terminating/stationary metro trains, because the original Pakenham station needed to be rebuilt on an elevated structure, and you can't build crossovers on the Skyrail. There's a car park on the northern side of the station, as well as bus stops for the dreaded rail replacement buses, whenever they may need to run. At the time of uploading, there aren't actually any regular bus routes that connect with the trains at East Pakenham. There was still some construction work going on the day I visited, so I didn't get any shots of the station concourse. But I did get some footage of HCMT Set 69 departing and another HCMT arriving. The trains sit at the station for around 13 minutes before returning to the city, with off-peak frequency on the Pakenham Line being every 20 minutes in each direction.
The next station is Pakenham.
Based on what I saw while I was there, the Pakenham and Cranbourne services typically run non-stop between Caulfield and South Yarra, although the train I rode in to return from East Pakenham did stop at Melbourne as well. The other two tracks on this section are used by trains on the Frankston line, and these services do stop at all stations between Caulfield and South Yarra. Later on, in the journey back to Flinders Street, I noticed this little detail at South Yarra, in the form of different colours on the station's signs that relate to the different lines serving each pair of platforms. Light blue for Cranbourne and Pakenham, green for Frankston, and pink for Sandringham. Next, I went out to the intersection of Flinders and Swanston Streets to observe trams passing by the world-famous main entrance to Flinders Street Station. Swanston Street is the busiest tram corridor in the world, as it's used by 8 of Melbourne's 24 tram routes. St Paul's Cathedral is located diagonally opposite the railway station, and indeed, I saw loads of other tourists taking photographs while I stood at this intersection. When I saw this particular D1 show up, I thought to myself, yeah, this is probably the closest I'll ever get to seeing the GAN in real life. But later in the trip, I did end up seeing a locomotive that used to be painted in the GAN livery, namely AN3. Once back in the railway station itself, I thought I'd go out to East Richmond aboard an Extrapolis 100. These units are nicknamed extrampolines due to their terrible suspension, which results in a very bouncy ride at times. As for why I went to East Richmond in the first place, it's because I wanted to revisit the station that was close to the hotel we stayed at in 2013. East Richmond Station first opened in 1860. These days, it's on the so-called Burnley Group, with the Belgrave, Lilydale, Glen Waverley and Alamein services all passing through the station, but it's usually only the Glen Waverley and peak time Alamein trains that actually stop here. Off-peak and weekend Alamein services are just a shuttle to and from Camberwell. The station is also served by the little A-class trams on Route 78, which runs from North Richmond to Balaclava. Although the rail scene at East Richmond was pretty busy, there was no variety in the motive power. This is because all Burnley Group services are run by Extrapolis 100s these days. After visiting East Richmond and changing trains at Flinders Street, I intended to go straight back to Moonee Ponds. But the plan suddenly changed as the train approached Kensington, and here's why. From on board the Comenge, I spotted a pair of N-class diesel locomotives in the head shunt near the flour mill, and looking quite strange without any V-line or PTV branding. 25 examples of this class were built by Clyde Engineering between 1985 and 1987, with at least 13 still being in service with V-line at the time of uploading. In March 2024, 4 Ns were stripped of their branding and leased to the Southern Short Haul Railroad, whoever they are, for use on freight trains. After having a look at Ns 466 and 464 in the small yard at Kensington, I ended the day's rail fanning back at Moonee Ponds.